So like we see that, core story, you try and identify the core story for every organization. So how does that work? How do you really go about identifying that core story for every business? And how does this core story get implemented in various different legs of the organization and various departments of the organization? How does that work?
So we would work with organizations to establish their core story, and really what we do is we establish a collective story. So in other words, we go in and we help organizations figure out what their authentic story is based on talking to a number of people within the organization and establishing a collective ambition. What do you care about? What's your purpose? What's your passion? So these are all what I would class people orientated. And we call this establishing your heart strategy. And then we craft that into a story. So in other words, most organizations have what they call a SMART strategy. This is the bit where this is how we're going to win in the market. This is how we're going to beat the competition. How we're going to do better for our customers. And you need that. You need a SMART strategy. But these days, your strategy is as good as your ability to engage people around it. And for that to happen, you need to have a heart strategy and have that built in to your strategy and create it as a story, have a strategy story. And then that permeates, that story is used for not just marketing or internal, it literally is almost like it's like a compass, it's a guide. It helps you make decisions as well as communicate. So we would help organizations establish that story and that authentic story. And then we embed it by, quite often we would work with organizations at the same time on storytelling skills. We call it story enabling the organization. We do some skills upgrade, but we would also look at how they can perpetrate that story or permeate that story throughout the organization. And that's quite often done through a number of activities to create a space for storytelling to happen and to drive the story we want to drive. And it's an interactive process. It's not about pushing out the new story. It's about engaging people with that story. And that starts with when we're even creating the story in the first place.
That's interesting. So you're saying that, such stories really bring out the culture of the organization. And that's the culture that is, I think, implemented for...
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about it, like the stories exist already. Every organization has a culture, for example. Well, if you want to assess an organization's culture, what you're really assessing is what's the story the people in this organization tell each other about what it's like to be here. That's what the culture is. And that's so one of our points often is if you want to impact culture, if you want to energize culture, energize the story. That's how you do it. But spend time in establishing what that story is. And one of the things we would do with organizations quite a lot is making sure that the senior management, so the culture story, the core story, if you like, needs to be established by the board, not by the marketing department or the HR department. Now, they definitely have inputs, but the board needs to own your core story. And if it's done there, it comes out of the board. In other words, strategy leaves the board in a much better format, in a much better condition. It's in a story already. And by the way, all the board members are connected to it emotively. Now it's not cold corporate communication. It's an exciting story that people care about already. And that's much more easy to work with if you're a marketing department, a HR department, or anybody else in the organization. So that's our approach, if you like, and that's how it gets permeated throughout the organization.
And there's consistency all over.
Yeah. Well, when it's done well, one of the things a core story should do is it should bring clarity, alignment, and authenticity. They're the three things we look for. If the strategy story is coming into the organization, it needs to be really clear and simple. It needs to be aligned across the organization, so it can't represent just one group. And it needs to be authentic, credible, but also from a place of passion, inside out. Lots of organizations, when they look for their story, they're looking out the window. They're like, oh, what does the customer want to hear this year, And then, and it's insight based, it's smart, but it's not authentic. And if you can get both of them, you can get smart and authentic, or smart and heart. That's a really powerful combination.
Yeah.
That's